Miami Dolphins coaching staff assembly continues and much more here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Here on the Locked On Network. Special thank you to each and every one of you who have helped make the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, just bet $5. Get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Today on the show, a number of new coaching staff changes have been announced in the last 24 hours. I obviously traveled home from Mobile, Alabama to home base from the 2026 Panini Senior Bowl. The saddest story ever told I saw on my timeline, courtesy of somebody who works in the NFL space. We're talking about the saddest story ever told as it pertained to the Miami Dolphins. And a mock draft roundup from a bunch of the NFL Network guys put out their first mock drafts. Bucky Brooks, Daniel Jeremiah. We'll talk about who they gave the Dolphins. So busy Friday here. Bringing you home for the end of the week. And we're going to dive right in with the two hires that were announced in the last 24 hours while I was traveling yesterday. The one that has my attention is not the one that everybody's kind of alarmed about, which is the Nathaniel Hackett hire. And let's be clear, Nathaniel Hackett's tenure as the head coach in Denver was an abject disaster. Nathaniel Hackett's tenure as the offensive coordinator in New York was not particularly good. I think you could be ventured to say it was bad. But Nathaniel Hackett is not hired in Miami to be the head coach or the offensive coordinator, in which I say the same thing that I've said for any of the other hires that you have questions about, which is, I don't know. I don't think it's realistic to expect all of these coaches to hit. But these coaches are in the NFL for a reason, and some of them I think will do well with the opportunity that they're given, because they're not overextended into roles that we don't feel good about them filling. What are we going to do? I think the most valuable thing Nathaniel Hackett brings, other than familiarity with Jeff Hafley and John Eric Sullivan, and he was in Green Bay this past year as a consultant, and I guess worked with Jeff Hafley, giving offensive perspective on defensive thoughts. He's another coach that has experience, right? Where you have Chris Tabor, the special teams coordinator. Now you have Nathaniel Hackett, who's formerly been an NFL head coach. Not a particularly successful one, but you can look at that tenure and point to certain things and say, well, let's not do this. But I'm more interested in the Al Washington hire. Al Washington hired from Notre Dame. He was a defensive assistant at Notre Dame. Pretty extensive career at the college ranks, and he overlapped with Jeff Hafley during the 2019 season, in which Jeff Hafley was the co-defensive coordinator and Al Washington was the linebackers coach. And he's a former player at Boston College. He got his coaching start in 2007 with defensive line at RPI, and then in 2008 he was at NC State as a graduate assistant, and then he goes to the PSAC and is a defensive line coach at Slippery Rock, and then Elon, and he's a linebacker coach there, and then he does special teams and defensive line at Boston College, Cincinnati, Michigan linebackers coach, Ohio State linebackers coach 2019 to 2021, Notre Dame defensive line coach 2022 to 2025, had just gotten assigned as the linebackers coach in Notre Dame and is getting hired, and reportedly, and this report comes courtesy, first it was John Bryce of Football Scoops. I've seen it reported in a couple other places as well. Al Washington is going to coach linebackers in Miami. This is yet another coach with significant college experience. And these college coaches, you want to be a draft and develop team. We talked about, touched on this yesterday, but then I thought it was kind of this aha moment, and then Al Washington drops as, hey, the latest like extensive and at big programs, right? Like Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame. He's been at Michigan, Notre Dame, or Ohio State since 2018 as a college coach, as a defensive assistant. Those cats know how to play football, right? It's not like we went to Division III and plucked some guy. Although there's been successful, Chris Shula was a defensive coordinator at Division III before he came up with the Rams and the Chargers before that, as an example of another guy that was a candidate for the head coaching job. So it's really fascinating to me. I can't guarantee it works, but I see what you're trying to do, Jeff Halfling. We get more positive reinforcement of it with Al Washington being a hire that the Dolphins are making to add to their defensive staff. And we still have a few kind of open-ended positions. We know they've made a change at quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator. We know they've made a change at running backs coach where they're not retaining Eric Studesville. New wide receivers coach. It's going to be a new offensive line coach with Zach Yenser. He's another guy who has 10 plus years of NFL experience, or 10 plus years of college experience coaching, and then 5 years of NFL experience as an assistant offensive line coach in San Francisco and in Houston. Defensive side of the ball, we got a linebackers coach. We got a cornerbacks coach that was just announced yesterday with Jamiel Adai, and that was the guy that we were talking about. This guy, he was the Miami Hurricane secondaries coach, and then he was in Buffalo for 2 years as the Bills cornerbacks coach, and now he's coming to Miami. It's another coach that's got that background and pipeline. There's some formalities to still be handed out as far as certain coaches. We'll see if coaches are retained. Haven't heard anything about the defensive line. Eyes there were obviously on that was one of Miami's best position coaches. And your question was whether or not there would be a change there. We're kind of in a holding pattern. There's been no formality. It's been reported that Sean Duggan is expected to join the Dolphins staff. Many people believe that to be as the defensive coordinator, but that hasn't formally been announced just yet. And I know they're kind of playing the waiting game and figure out if Anthony Weaver's going to get a head coaching job before they finalize any hires on that side of the ball. So Al Washington, the latest hire. I like it. He's a very well-respected coach from his time as a linebackers coach at Michigan and Ohio State. He's got some experience doing defensive line as well. So I know everybody's interested in the Nate Hackett hire. And I will touch on Nate Hackett in just a second after the break. But the Al Washington one was the one that really got my eyebrows going, because we just kind of touched on, and I had that aha moment yesterday with Coach Adai, and now we get another example of it with Al Washington. So Nathaniel Hackett plus the saddest story ever told for the Miami Dolphins in recent history. We're going to get into that after the break. Make sure you guys stick with us. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to hand things off and just move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to fill out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms. Get you every deduction you possibly can. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver. It gives a real peace of mind knowing that an actual expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert did not file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate. Get back to the rest of your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. It is the last call for football. Sad, I know. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60. FanDuel's making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing a favorite, riding an underdog, building one last same-game parlay, This is the game that everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season, make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet $5, get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Quick walk through Nathaniel Hackett's history, because people remember Denver 2022, and they should remember Denver 2022. It was bad. He was one and done, right? People remember Jets 23-24 offensive coordinator brought in to be with Aaron Rodgers, and that whole experience was a whole boatload of fun, right? But there's a pretty strong foundation of experience here. And when you consider the full resume and recognize that he is a quarterback's coach, which is the lowest ranking title he's held since 2015-2016 Jacksonville. And he was a quarterback's coach in Jacksonville for those 2 seasons, and then he was promoted to offensive coordinator, and then he goes to Green Bay to be the offensive coordinator, and he works his way up. There's obviously a peak of performance. I mean, Buddy was working with Blake Bortles here. Let's not act like he was gifted Aaron Rodgers from the very beginning, although he did work with Aaron Rodgers as the offensive coordinator in Green Bay from 2019, 2020, and 2021. That's going to help your outlook as a coach, right? But it wasn't just with Aaron Rodgers. Nathaniel Hackett was first in 2003 an assistant linebackers coach at UC Davis, offensive and defensive assistant to the coordinators at Stanford, specialist and recruiting coordinator at Stanford. A little bit of college experience here. There's going to be a little bit more college experience here. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, offensive quality control, 2006, 2007. Buffalo Bills, offensive quality control, 2008, 2009. Syracuse Orange, college experience. Passing game coordinator, quarterbacks, tight ends coach. A man of many talents. And then offensive coordinator, quarterbacks, tight ends from 2011 to 2012 before going back to Buffalo. So my guy liked Western New York. We were between the Bills and the Syracuse Orange from 2008 to 2014 because he was the Bills offensive coordinator for 13 and 14. Quarterbacks coach in Jacksonville 15-16, promoted to offensive coordinator for 16-17-18, goes to Green Bay to serve the same role 2019, 2020, 2021, and then gets the head coaching job in Denver. And then has 2 years as the Jets offensive coordinator, and then was a defensive analyst for the Packers last year to give offensive perspective against defensive calls. Okay. No, he was a part of that Jaguars team that went to the AFC Championship game, and Miles Jack was down. Should have beat the Patriots that year. It's none of my business. Nathaniel Hackett, I think, as his profile actually kind of mirrors in some ways Darrell Bevell in like an ironic way, where like Darrell Bevell kind of had like the original glow up and the come up, and he's the offensive coordinator in Seattle. And then we hit the ceiling and he doesn't get the head coach one and done that Nate Hackett did. And then ever since it's kind of been like pinball around a little bit. There's an interim head coaching stint in Jacksonville, and then he's the Dolphins quarterbacks coach. I think Nathaniel Hackett as the quarterbacks coach with the experience that he has is a fine hire. Is it the most exciting hire that you could have? No. But as the quarterbacks coach, relative to, having worked with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Jeff Garcia and Blake Bortles and Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers again, okay, he's seen some good, some bad, and some ugly at quarterback in the NFL. And if you get him a good one, I think he'd be just fine. And I appreciate some experience on a staff that has a lot of leaning into young coaches that can connect with young players. This is not, the Nathaniel Hackett hire is not the saddest story ever told. And when I tell you I am getting heart palpitations just thinking about reading this statistic to you, it makes me so mad. This comes courtesy of Dustin Baker. I've got it up on my other screen here. Which NFL teams use the players they find in the draft? Most games started by the team that drafted the players, and those players started for that team since 2022, right? This was the Devil's year of Dolphins draft because all the picks went away. We traded them for vets. So 22, 23, 24, 25. You know this draft class is headlined by Channing Tindall, Eric Azukama, Cam Smith, Devon Achane. Those two draft classes are half of this body of work. So set your expectations accordingly. But when I tell you the numbers, I promise you, you're going to be sad because it made me devastated. The Green Bay Packers are number one on this list with 563 games started by players that they have drafted in Green Bay. The Packers put the name on the card and handed the card into the commish since 2022. First in the NFL. Giants, Texans, Rams, Bucks, Jets, Ravens, Lions, Seahawks. Those are the teams in the NFL that are at least over 400. The Packers are the only team that's over 500. Okay? So I'm going to say that one more time because when I tell you the last number, Packers, 563 starts by players that they themselves drafted since 2022. Giants, Texans, Rams, Bucks, Jets, Ravens, Lions, Seahawks, all between 402 and 493. Doesn't guarantee you success. There's some good and some bad in there. Gang, the Dolphins are dead last in the NFL, which will not surprise you. But it's the number. 122. So think about this. Just do offense and defense. There's 11 spots on offense and 11 spots on defense. So that's 22 players for 17 games for 4 seasons. Do you know how many opportunities that is? Do you know how many games, start opportunities that is for all 22 positions across 4 years of 17 games? It's 1,496. And the Dolphins have 122. It is 8%. That is horrible. 8%. And I get like Green Bay at 563. It's not like they're at 90% of their starts in the last 4 years, right? Like that's not a realistic expectation. You got guys that are tenured guys. You've got guys that you do sign in free agency. And the Dolphins say, oh, well, every year, 40 to 50% of your roster turns over on an annual basis. Try not turning over the guys that don't play. Because you've got 92% rollover on a 4-year basis. That is appalling. That is appallingly bad. And I'm not putting all that on, that's the Mike McDaniel 4 years. I'm not putting that on Mike McDaniel. Some of it belongs to Mike McDaniel and he's got to wear it. Some of it belongs to Chris Greer and he's got to wear it. Some of it belongs to the players and they've got to wear it. Some of it belongs to the scouting staff and they've got to wear it for a missed player evaluation here, a missed player evaluation there, a missed character evaluation here, whatever, right? It's everybody. And if you want to know why, I'm willing to at least say, hey, I'm cool. I'm smooth this offseason, right? It's because they made a change from that. Because that ain't going to fly. You're not going to win anything doing that. Because the teams that are joining you in the bottom of the list here, teams that are below 250, the Vikings, okay, they've been up and down. The Browns, the Panthers, the Broncos. Obviously, the Broncos have had a glow up. I'd expect that number goes up. But even the Broncos are at almost twice the number the Dolphins have at 122. They have 50 less than the next lowest team in the league. 8%. 8%. That is the saddest story ever told. And if you want to know why you're waking up on Friday, January 30th, or Saturday, January 31st, whenever you're listening to this program, and the Dolphins are in the shoes that they are in, that can't happen. And if it does, everybody should be out, regardless of what other redeeming qualities they may or may not have. That's a farce. Mock draft roundup coming up next. Got me all fired up here, Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your job post at the top of the page, and it helps you reach the right candidates faster. If you were to hire somebody for this show, you could go straight to Indeed, be very specific about what you need, and get real experience, not just resume buzzwords. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report to hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all the boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now. Show the show support by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. If you're hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Indeed, the Dolphins get it. Rare form. No caffeine yesterday, so we've got 2 days worth today because I was traveling, and the only thing they sell at I won't say because you never know. They only sell a certain kind of caffeinated beverages in the airports, and it is not the brand in which I choose to partake. So, rare form today. Appreciate you guys sticking with us. We do have a 2026 NFL mock draft roundup for the Dolphins, courtesy of a couple of guys over at NFL Network. Mel Kiper, his most recent one that came out was like a week and a half ago. But Daniel Jeremiah, Eric Edholm, Bucky Brooks put their mocks out this week. They kind of celebrated the arrival of the Senior Bowl and that portion of the calendar with mock drafts. I also threw another one in there from somebody you might recognize. Let's start with the Daniel Jeremiah mock. Daniel Jeremiah gave Caleb Downs, Ohio State safety, to the Dolphins. This obviously is a no-brainer from a best player available standpoint. So it's interesting, right? Because you're foiling. John Alex Sullivan says we're going to draft by best player available. But they also talk about wanting and thirsting to build the team from the inside out and build up the trenches. There's a positional value element there. I do think if Caleb Downs would be on the board, he would qualify as the standout best player available that would warrant consideration in turning in the car. I think he's a great player. I think he's a do-it-all kind of safety with elite football instincts. He's not as big and long and powerful as Kyle Hamilton. And he's not like a 4-3 guy, but he checks every box you could possibly want for a defensive chess piece. And obviously with Jeff Hafley and his coaching background, that's a spot that I think could make a lot of sense. Bucky Brooks and Eric Edholm both gave tight end Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon to the Dolphins. There's an attractiveness to this player going in this offense. Not as attractive as it would be if Mike McDaniel were still here. I think if Mike McDaniel were still here and you didn't have the questions that exist around quarterback and you were kind of moving on then in that similar direction, this would be a very top of the board fit. Now, we don't know exactly what the scheme's going to look like. He is a player that can blur the lines of being an offensive weapon and helping with the trenches and building it inside out. And it is like a weird year where we just got them heaping praise at Caleb Downs as an option at 11. I don't think it's the right fit for where this team needs to do so much work, whether that's on the edge, whether that's the offensive line at tackle/guard, whether that is in the secondary, whether that's the pat. Like, there's a lot of work to be done in a lot of places. I would be surprised to see the world in which Kenyon Sadiq would be considered the best player available. So as a result, I'm meh. Like, I love the player. And I would certainly get to a point where, like, if that card got turned in, I would say, like, yes, I think there's a clear and obvious pathway for this to be an impact player in the NFL and for the Dolphins in this offense. It's the opportunity cost for me amidst the coaching staff changes, amidst the questions of what is going to happen at quarterback, that has me kind of lukewarm on the idea. Mel Kiper gave a player that I've given to the Dolphins before, and we're going to talk about mine last. Spoiler alert, that was the throw-in. Keldric Faulk was the choice for Mel Kiper. Very polarizing player for Dolphins fans, and I get it, right? Like, it's another edge with traits that doesn't have top-end production. He's got some rare traits. I think he's a very good run defender early on. He's raw as a pass rusher. I think that's the biggest difference between, like, the Chop Robinsons of the world, who was like 250 coming out, and Faulk, who was 280 and has alignment versatility and can play the run in all of it. He's a little bit more like Odafe Owe than he is Chop Robinson. And Owe was a good run defender when he played early. And then the last 2 years, the pass rush development has paid off. And between Baltimore getting double-digit sacks last year and then getting traded in a contract year to the Chargers and being a productive player, if you're willing to play that's a long game pick in my mind, but one that I think makes sense with some of the things that they've talked about. And I am not deterred by the common boxes that are checked from some of the disappointing, like, people mentioned Deion Jordan, people mentioned Chop Brown. Everybody's an individual player, right? So I get, like, there's scar tissue, and it's like me talking about Davison Igbinosun, and people just hear Dolphins draft cornerback prospect Igbe, and they're like, nope, can't do it. I get it. My pick for my most recent 3-round mock draft that I did with A to Z, because I did a 7-round Dolphins mock this week, but then I also did a 3-round mock where I picked the Dolphins picks and then a couple of the teams with a collaboration with the other members at A to Z. Oliva Vega Ione, offensive guard from Penn State. He's my top-rated offensive lineman. Like, I've done the film eval on, like, the top 15 guys in the class. Vega, for short, is the top-rated offensive lineman that I have based off the film. Yes, he plays guard. Do I care? No. I want an impactful player. And, like, I've given Sonny Styles out. I've given Francis Malioga out. I've given Jermon McCoy out. I've given Caleb Downs and Kenyon Sadiq and Keldric Faulk. I have at some point in this process mock the Dolphins, all of those players. And spoiler alert, I do enough mock drafts. Like, I'm not just going to keep plugging in the same guy unless it's the Raiders and Fernando Mendoza. Right? It's all about exploring the different iterations. So when the Dolphins talk about building this thing from the inside out, and Jeff Hafley talks about, we want to run the ball, and we want to run the ball when they know we're going to run the ball, Vega's the kind of guy that can change that. And I think if you can go Paul, Savaianaya, ideally with competition, Brewer, Vega, question mark at right tackle, we got something to work with here. And I get Jonah's a big question mark, but Vega, to me, is a very clean player, very good in pass protection, has great size, good athleticism for his size. He's not an elite athlete, kind of James Daniels-y as far as, like, the athletic profile, but not 29 years old, getting paid $8 million to play 3 snaps, kind of James Daniels-y, right? We sit here and we thirst about fixing the offensive line. Sometimes that means you got to make that investment. And there is a realm of possibilities where the board doesn't break in a favorable way, in which I could see Vega being my best available player. So I gave him to him based off Jeff Hafley and John Eric Sullivan talk about how they want to play football with this football team. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys, as always, for checking out the show. Who will I mock to the Dolphins next week? Tune in next time on Dragon Ball Z and find out. Hope you guys enjoy the show. Enjoy your weekend. I'll be back to talk to you all again on Monday. Keep it locked in right here, Locked On Dolphins. I'll talk to you all again soon.